Hello and welcome back to another Night Guys Gaming video. Today we have a battle report between the new Aeldari Corsair Coterie detachment and a Leagues of Votann Needguard Oathband. This was 2,000 points on map 5, Dawn of War. Linchpin, which is a bit of a different map. Don't play on it too often, but it is what we randomly rolled, and so we went ahead and went with it. So let's take a look at what we're going to be talking about today in this video. So I really wanted to kind of just focus on the Corsair detachment and some of its mechanics, and just kind of showcase how quick and mobile the Corsairs are, and kind of put them up against something that's pretty tough, has some good shooting. What you'll see is that the Corsair Coterie is very good at getting primary, which is something that a lot of Aeldari players struggle with. The sticky objectives at the end of the phase is an incredible ability, where you can even sometimes do a hit and run style of sticking an objective where you can move onto an objective and charge off of it, but it's still got sticky because you sticky it at the end of the phase. It's also great for scouting onto objectives or a number of different situations where as long as you have more OC on the objective at the end of the phase, it becomes sticky and will stay that way until the opponent puts more OC on that objective than you have. A lot of players are going to want to put things in reserves to try to avoid some of our long range shooting. But if they do that, we can often screen out a lot of the board and make it pretty difficult for them to get their reinforcements on the table. We're able to rapidly engage with the opponent and do some move blocks, and that will help us to dictate the tempo of the engagement from turn 1. So you'll be seeing these things in the battle report, so let's take a look at the list and then hop into the battle report. So this is the list that I took. It is 1,995 points. We have Prince Riel with the Arc Raider, which gives him a Vector Aura, and Jane Czar are our only two characters. For battle line, we have 3 sets of Corsair Void Reapers, one with a Webway Pathstone that cost 85 points because of the 20-point upgrade. Now, with Prince Riel having Deep Strike because of the Webway Pathstone, it's kind of nice because he can Rapid Ingress, go charge something. If he survives, go back up into Deep Strike, Rapid Ingress again. And that's kind of the idea behind him, is to possibly be a Rapid Ingress threat. You could also start him on the table, pull him up into reserves, and do an early game Rapid Ingress and charge in, but I feel like generally you're going to want to start him in Deep Strike and possibly get 2 uses out of his Webway Pathstone. We then have 3 units of Rangers, 3 units of Dark Reapers, all with Tempest Launchers, 2 units of 5 Sky Reavers, and 1 unit of Howling Banshees. This will round out most of our infantry. Outside of the 2 D-cannon support weapons that we brought, that's under the heavy support side there, they are to help cause a lot of problems for our opponent as they try to take the objectives back from us. We have a lot of long-range firepower and heavy firepower to shoot them back off of the objectives. To round out our heavy support, we have the Fire Prisms. We took 3 of those, and then we have 2 Starfangs to do a lot of different things between screening, move blocking, capturing objectives and sticking them, throwing grenades, giving stealth. They actually do quite a few things, and I think in this detachment they're actually quite good. So that's our list. Let's take a look at what our opponent brought for this battle report. So again, our opponent was playing the Needguard Oathband, which has a lot of pretty strong stratagems. He had just 1 character, which was a Call, that had the Oathbound Speculator, which gives them +1 to wound under certain situations with their yield points. And then there was 5 Ironheart Hearthguard and 10 Ironheart Hearthguard, and the Call was leading that 10-man. They took the appropriate war gear to have Deep Strike for both units, and then the Ironheart Hearthguard had the 5-up invulns on the 10-man, was another one of their crests that they can take. For the other infantry, they had 2 units of Hearthkin Jaegers, and the Jaegers were actually split with the Capricus Carriers, so he actually ended up with 4 units basically, each one with a 5-man. Then he had 2 units of Chthonian Berserks. Those are the guys that have the mole launchers with some indirect that can turn off Overwatch, which is kind of interesting. And the Berserks hit pretty hard in melee, and they have a 4-up Feel No Pain. He also had 6 Ironkin Steeljacks. Those were inside the Hecaton Land Fortresses. And 6 Brokir Thunderkin that was inside a Hecaton Land Fortress. And he also had a 3-man Brokir Thunderkin that was in reserves. And then a Harnkin Pioneer. Those are the bike guys that have Scout Move. So as mentioned, he had Hecaton Land Fortresses. He took 2 of those, and then he took 2 of the Capricus Carriers that had the Jaegers in them that also have Scout Moves and a little bit of shooting as well. And so that rounds out our opponent's list for 2,000 points on the nose. Now that we went over the list real quickly, let's hop into the battle report, take a look at how it went, And then afterwards, we'll do a little recap and talk about some ideas behind the coterie, and then maybe what would be some good changes we would make to our list. Okay, so starting with deployment, we have some Rangers up here. And this was something I wanted to try to do this game and just kind of see how it felt. And we also have some Rangers over here. Now, we do have redeploy with Uriel because he gives us 3 redeploys, so we could be moving these Rangers if we wanted to. But I wanted to actually touch on some objectives, because what this will do is if our opponent goes first and we have a model touching every objective, then it will allow us to cause mortal wounds most likely when he goes to touch the objectives. Because it doesn't have to be a Corsair unit that's touching the objective, it could be our Rangers, and so as soon as they go to step on, for example, these Jaegers, step onto the objective, they will probably take D3 mortal wounds, which is great. Same thing with his land fortress or something that would come out of the land fortress. If they move on to the objective, they're going to take mortals. So I thought maybe it'd be worth trying to see what it was like to have Rangers on the objectives in case we did end up going second. Now, you are possibly giving your opponent some easy secondary points, so there is a bit of a trade-off there. I don't know if it's necessarily the best idea, but with Rangers being able to reactive move and having stealth, I figured it was as good of a chance to try it as any, because against Votann, where they're going to be mostly doing shooting, we actually have opportunity to possibly keep the Rangers alive anyways. So this was the plan for the Rangers. Now we have another squad of Rangers right behind this ruin, ready to do move blocking, go contest the objective, and anything else we need them to do, of course. I do think that 3 Rangers is probably too redundant in this list, and we'll talk about some list changes towards the end after I played this game, but this 3rd Ranger is here basically to help attack this objective again later on in the game. We have Howling Banshees and Jane Czar here. She's basically here because they had a lot of infantry inside these land fortresses that are up here in this top left corner. And so I wanted Jane Czar to be in the general vicinity of where a lot of the heavy infantry were going to be. As you can see on this side, he's got some bikes, he's got some light infantry inside these transports, and that is stuff that I can take on with most of my other units. I wanted the big 3-wound infantry models that are coming out of these land fortresses to be something that Jane Czar could get into. So she's sitting over here, staged up far, and she's got 16 inches, which should get her pretty easily up this direction and able to attack anything that he brings in to either stage or try to attack the objective around this ruin. And so that's why Jane Czar is in this position. Now we do have Dark Reapers here in the center and over here. Now, I think this was okay. I do also think that it would have been okay to have 2 sets of Dark Reapers more towards the center because of the stratagem that gives us 18-inch lone op. Having a Exarch sit on the objective while the other 4 are outside shooting means that we can often get our shooting off the Dark Reapers and keep them safe. And by having 2 in here, we could possibly put some over here where they're pretty safe and take shots this direction, and then maybe put some over here where they're more exposed but use 18-inch lone op, and just have the opportunity to lone op either of them, as opposed to in this area when they move into this ruin, they're pretty much just out in the open, able to be shot in a sense, and we're not able to lone op them because they're not touching an objective. So I do think this was fine because it did give us some different sight lines, but the sight line that we get over in this area just kind of gives us over here and into this ruin, whereas if we're in the center, we pretty much get pretty good lines over here and somewhat into the ruin, but also still this long line this direction and the one here, importantly, which down in this bottom right, they do not get by going up into this ruin. So I do think that having the Dark Reapers in the center may have been a better choice than down here beside the prism. So if we go first, the Sky Reavers and Corsair Void Reavers that are both right here could move forward, and they will be able to then move and try to move block these land fortresses with the Sky Reavers, while the Corsair Void Reavers would probably go behind this ruin, whether they go first or second, but head towards the center objective to be able to contest and control the center objective, either in the first turn or second turn, depending on if we go first or second. But really, we want to have these Sky Reavers right on the deployment line, ready to scout forward. They can scout behind this ruin if we go second, but then try to get this nice move block and try to hem in these land fortresses that are kind of in that corner. They will do a good job of that. On the other side, we have the same thing. We have Corsair Void Reavers and the Corsair Sky Reavers right on the line, and so our Void Reavers will be able to move up into this ruin, and then the Sky Reavers will be able to move up and then get a move block maybe kind of along the lines of this to try to stop these guys. And then I realized after I was planning that these guys do have fly, but what we can try to do is just figure out where they would land, about 12 inches, so around this area, and then put our Sky Reavers in a line here and make it difficult for him to interact with this objective and make it almost impossible for him to actually take it from us when we have our Corsair Void Reavers on it. Another thing that the Sky Reavers could do was go after these Jaegers because they do have reactive moves, so we have to be cognizant of that reactive move and they can help us deal with them as well. Now our Fire Prisms are sitting in the back, of course, over here and here, and the two over here are really safe because most of the big shooting that the opponent has is in these land fortresses and they only have 30-inch range. So one of the nice things is in this matchup we have these prisms that have very long range and these land fortresses that have like half the range, and so even if he moves up 10 inches and then takes his 30 inches of shooting, it only gets to somewhere in this vicinity, and so we're not really in danger here. And the one back in the bottom left is pretty safe, and so we have our Fire Prisms ready to move up and take shots in all sorts of different angles. This one can move up this way and shoot this angle. This one can move up this way and shoot across this angle. So we have a lot of different shooting lanes covered, and they will generally be able to see each other, and so we'll be able to get them all to shoot through each other as well. And then we have a Starfang sitting on our home objective. That's so that it gets stickied, because I didn't want to have anything else back to sticky the home objective. Probably could have done it with the Corsairs here, just move this guy kind of in the spot where this D cannon is, and then had him do a scout move, and he probably could have made it close enough to go around there. But I wanted to make sure they could really get up tight into this ruin, because the sight lines are pretty good, like this and this, so you have to be pretty careful behind this ruin, and so that's why I wanted to keep the Corsair Void Reavers up there. But the Starfang did just fine, and we have another Starfang on this side to basically do the same thing, get some shooting in, possibly do some sticky objectives. It's really nice to have something that moves as fast as the Starfangs that also has sticky objectives and is toughness 6, so it's not going to die to the simple shooting that a lot of the skirmish units have. And that's basically the idea behind our deployment. We do have Uriel in Deep Strike, and the nice thing about that unit is we gave them the enhancement for Deep Strike, and he'll be able to come in, kill something, and then the idea is that after he kills something, we should be able to keep him safe, and then on our opponent's turn, they will go through, and as long as they can't tag him, he could go back up in Deep Strike, we could rapid ingress him again and get him into another target. So that's at least the idea. So this was pretty much how the deployment was. I did start Uriel on the board right here, kind of in this area, and just picked him up, put him in the Deep Strike, and we also kind of moved where these Rangers were and put them on both objectives. And then on this side, we put the Rangers across like this, just to try to stop this scout move here from really doing much, because the Rangers have pushed the 9 inches to here, so at most he's going to scout move to his deployment, and then with 12 inches he basically can only get to right here, and this Ranger will be able to basically move block that move, so he's not really going to be able to get this transport on the other side of this ruin and try to get any shooting or anything done on this side, although the only thing that's inside here are the Jaegers, but they do have the heavy weapons, and so just to try not to let him get any damage into some of our squishy tanks and infantry, we wanted to move block, and that's why the Rangers are kind of shaped like this. And then we had to, of course, stay outside of 9 inches from his Jaegers. So that's basically deployment, and the opponent decided to deploy the way he did, mainly because he was concerned with our indirect. So the opponent has some Steeljacks and some of the Thunderkin in the land fortresses up here, and he's got Jaegers inside of these transports. And then he also has some Berserks that have the Mole Launcher, and he was really concerned that our Dark Reapers would take those Berserks off the board if he put them on the board. And so he tried to keep a lot of things in reserves and in his transports. And I think at the end when we talked about it, that was probably a really big mistake just because of the way this army likes to play. And this was his first time playing against the Corsair detachment, so he wasn't as familiar with how this would play. And then, of course, the opponent has a whole bunch of their Terminator-style guys that actually shoot and hit pretty hard in melee, but he's got a squad of 10 with a leader and a squad of 5, and those have Deep Strike, and they have 5-up invulns and 2-up saves, and so they're pretty tough little guys to take out. But what's kind of funny is we actually have a lot of good shooting into a lot of the different stuff that he has. So before we move on to turn 1, I just want to talk a little bit about the fact that we have a lot of good shooting into a lot of his profiles. So for his land fortresses that don't have invuln saves, we have our fire prisms that are going to do a lot of work. We have D cannons that are scary for his land fortresses as well. And then for most of his infantry, that's toughness 5 and 6, we have the Starfangs are actually pretty efficient into it with strength 6, AP 3, damage 2. That's a great profile actually into a lot of the Votann infantry. And then, of course, we have Janzar and the Banshees, which are going to be really good into most all of his infantry. Our Corsair Blasters and the fusion guns from the Skyreavers at strength 8 is really great into his bikes and transports because we're wounding him on 3s because the bikes are toughness 7. And so we really just have a lot of very good shooting into our opponent. The Dark Reapers on top of that with strength 10, AP2 ignores cover, and 3 damage are really good into his bikes, into his infantry that have 3 wounds. And so there's really not a target that we can't shoot with most of our units that they are not going to be efficient into. So I think this, to start with, was a tough matchup for the opponent just because of the list we have is actually pretty efficient all in all into a lot of different units that he put on the table. Okay, with deployment wrapped up, let's jump into the first turn after the scout moves. Okay, so our opponent ended up getting first turn, which I was actually kind of happy about because I wanted to see how well Corsair Coterie would do going second, because I think if we go first, we actually just pretty much jail him for several turns to the point where he can't really come back. And so I was kind of glad to give this list a little bit more of a test by having the opponent go first. So the opponent scouts forward. He's got his transport here. He scouts forward with the bikes and the transport up here. Our Rangers are stopping him from getting any closer. So we got 9 inches here. We got 9 inches here, stopping him from going any further. So we kind of blocked off some of the scouting, which was great. And this was the state of the game after the scout moves. We did bring up our Corsairs here, and we brought Corsairs up here so that we could get ready to sticky and attack these objectives, and also just having the Skyreavers up front so that we could do some move blocking as soon as possible. And the Starfang, of course, moved up as well, and this one just kind of stayed back on our home objective. And that was it for the scout move, so let's see what the opponent did on their first turn. Okay, so this is the end of our opponent's first turn, and they had engaged in all fronts and secure no man's land. So he needed to touch 2 objectives. So the Jaegers moved to the center, took 2 mortal wounds because we were touching that objective. Then we reactive moved our Rangers on this objective over here. We were already on, but we just moved them back a little bit and moved them this direction and hid them from the Jaegers back behind this ruin, the few here, so his Jaegers really wouldn't get any shooting or any damage into our Rangers. And he moved a land fortress onto the objective as well, right here, which also ended up taking mortal wounds and actually took 3 mortal wounds. And I actually kind of joked that I think this was the most damage I've ever seen Rangers do in turn 1, especially to something that's toughness 12 and has a 2-up save. So doing 3 mortal wounds to the land fortress was amazing. Doing a couple to the Jaegers was great as well. So we're already on a good start doing 5 mortal wounds with our Rangers just because we started on the objectives. Now, I think that this is something to actually consider depending on the opponent. If your opponent is going to be able to easily take you off the objective, it may be something where you don't want to give them that early game scoring on secondaries if they happen to pick up the right type of secondaries. But on the other hand, being able to almost guarantee that you're going to get some mortal wounds on your opponent if they have to go touch objectives, it is kind of a nice situation. So this worked out great and was a great start for the battle for us to be able to get some chip damage on his units to start off right away. He decided to stay up in this corner and just shoot our Rangers off the objective here. And then our opponent just put some of his shooting up here to shoot our Rangers and was able to take them off the board, and didn't decide to push up because he didn't want to give me free damage into these guys as much as if he had moved forward. And I wasn't too worried about it because I knew I was just going to sticky this next turn and then actually go up and try to do some move blocking. So talking to him afterwards, I actually think this was kind of a mistake. The situation of dealing with Coterie is you really can't afford to stay back like this, because what I'm going to be able to do is basically just block him into this corner and block him into this corner, and he's going to struggle to actually do much on the rest of the board. And by not being a little bit more aggressive by pushing forward, and getting some of his units forward, which he probably needed to bring this guy forward, at least get something back in here, and try to start claiming some space, especially since he went first. I think he probably made a little bit of a mistake by kind of hanging back, and then also probably could have left a fortress behind the ruin here and just threw infantry onto the objective and tried to not let me get quite as much shooting into the land fortresses to start with, because the fire prisms are actually pretty good at dealing with things like land fortresses, and it's going to be pretty easy for me to get shots into this land fortress. So he did say that he forgot that the fire prisms have a reroll on the hit roll and one on the wound roll, and the math, he was like, probably means you're probably going to be able to take that out. And it's not a guarantee by any stretch, but we actually have pretty good chances of doing quite a bit of damage into these fortresses with 3 fire prisms all shooting into it. Gives us the 4 attacks, and 3 of those attacks effectively will have rerolls to hit and wound. So pretty decent shooting into the fortresses. It'll put him on 5-up saves unless he uses a stratagem or does something to try to help that situation. So the opponent was able to touch 2 objectives on here and score 5 points for Secure No Man's Land, and only scored 1 point for being in the 2 board quarters. He didn't get anything into the other board quarters, so he is going to be starting with 6 points in secondaries to end his first turn. So let's take a look and see what we did in our first turn to respond. All right, so in our first turn, we get Tempting Target, and we get No Prisoners. So we get some secondaries that make us want to be a little aggressive turn 1, which is usually not what you want, but this army is so fast that I figured we'd be fine and we'd be able to get at least 4 points on Take No Prisoners. Hopefully get a full 5 points depending on how some of our shooting went. So I decided to be pretty aggressive here, and I did make a really big mistake because I kind of moved before I fully thought through the turn. That is something that you should never really do. Make sure you're thinking fully through exactly what you want to do with all of your units before you start making your moves. You're much better off to plan out your turn before you move anything, and then just start moving it all after you've got your plan, because that'll give you an idea of where you need to make sure you don't get overwatched. It'll allow you to think about what you might need to get into each type of unit and how you're going to try to stage things. And so just really take the time to think about what you're going to do on your turn before you start moving the models. And what I did was move Janezar up here, and this was just completely unnecessary. I was thinking at first of getting very aggressive, trying to take out a land fortress and killing the guys inside. The problem is I put her on the wrong side. She really needed to be spread out like this so that they could get an attack into the things that popped out regardless of where he drops them out. But where she's sitting right now, if they come out on this side, then it's going to be quite a long charge for her to get into that unit. And that is just kind of a silly thing to do, as well as I wanted to make sure that I could tag these land fortresses and make it so they could not shoot my fire prisms, because I knew if I could keep the fire prisms alive, that he wouldn't have much in the rest of his army that could actually shoot the fire prisms to kill them. He would have to try to get in melee with his Terminators, and his Thunderkin would have a chance, but they have pretty short range comparatively. So if I could keep my fire prisms safe, they could kind of dominate the game later. So I was trying to make sure that these fortresses would not be able to get within 30 inches of my fire prism. So I kept my fire prism back here, and this land fortress, if it moves over just a little bit, 30 inches came to basically right in front of my fire prism. So all it would have to do is move forward a little, and then it would be able to get its big gun into the fire prism. And I wanted to try to avoid that and make sure that this fortress back here would not be able to get shots into my fire prism. We did advance the Starfang over here to basically just kind of screen this area. We don't want any of the Terminators dropping in our back corner. We moved out our Dark Reapers to get line of sight into the fortress, but possibly even infantry if they drop out on this side, which we figured he probably wouldn't. But they also get a secondary target all the way across the map into this right over here. 48-inch range is amazing. Feels great, and so it gives our Dark Reapers some different options. And then we have our Dark Reapers here that also popped out, ready to shoot into this transport. So we feel pretty good about popping that transport because it's only toughness 7. It's only got 7 wounds, so we just need 3 of our Dark Reaper shots to go through, and it's a dead vehicle. So it's a little hard to see, but I'll box them in here with the green. And we have our Sky Reavers right up here to do a move block to stop our opponent from getting to this objective. Now, he is going to be able to get to it with some things, but the plan is if we destroy this vehicle, they'll no longer have fly, the guys will pop out, and then they won't be able to come around and get to the objective. And then the bikes have 12-inch move, but they will also only be able to get to about here, and they would not be able to move without getting inside of the engagement range of the Sky Reavers, so we're effectively move blocking the bikes as well. And we also didn't want anything to move to the side of the ruin over here, and so we brought the Starfang to block that as well. So we basically just move block these things, even though they have fly, because we're thinking about where they could move, not just trying to stand in front of them when they have fly and they could just fly over top of us. The other thing about the Starfang being here is it gives us shots into these guys, which is pretty nice efficiency into them because we're going to be able to get that strength 6 shooting into these guys here. We're also going to be able to shoot all of our Exarchs into these guys. That should help us get the no prisoners because he did do the reactive move into this ruin. I think he rolled a 6 actually and got them in the ruin pretty safe away from our Void Reavers. But our Void Reavers did come on to do Tempting Target. He did the center because he just wanted me to put something on the center. So we did Tempting Target on the center, and we have it stickied. And these guys are going to sit back here, which ended up working out really nice for us. We brought our D cannons over on this side so that they could also get shots into the fortress. And that way we have all the fire prisms into the land fortress, the D cannons in the land fortress, plus we have a possibility of grenades from the Sky Reavers that are right here next to Jane Czar. And in general, I think we're pretty comfortably taking out this fortress. Now, funny enough, we did have the Rangers sitting back here to help do some screening and just kind of sit on the objective because they actually survived the shooting from the land fortress, which was pretty wild. They were in the ruin, and so some of them were getting 4-up saves against the AP0 weapons, and between those saves and the 5-up invulns against his big shooting, and then him missing because of stealth, we actually only lost 3 Rangers, which was kind of wild when you get shot at by these fortresses. They usually tend to kill most things they shoot at, so the 2 Rangers living was very unexpected, but we always take the gifts that we get. And so that's basically the turn. These guys have no one to shoot, so they're just going to be chilling back here, waiting for their turn. And of course, the Exarch will be able to shoot the Jaegers. So the plan is we'll get no prisoners by taking out the transport, the land fortress, and the Jaegers. And then, of course, we'll grab Tempting Target. So we should have a nice 10-point score to start off our turn 1 with this game. And all at the same time, we're going to be tying up our opponent's fortresses. We're going to be move blocking the vehicles up here, making it very difficult for our opponent to stop us from scoring really well on our turn 2. Okay, so after our shooting, you can see we did take out the fortress, we did take out the other transport, and we took out the Jaeger. So everything going to plan so far. Now, of course, Jane Czar ended up back here, not being able to really make a safe charge. We're just going to charge her into the fortress and tie him up and try to keep him from moving so he can only move backwards and fall back. And then we're going to try to get any kind of extra shooting that we have into the targets that popped out. So he did have 6 of the Thunderkin, and the D cannons were able to pop, I think, 1 each, or maybe one of our blasters did as well. I can't remember, but between the D cannons, which didn't actually have to help us take out the land fortress, the fire prisms did it by themselves. The D cannons took out, I think, 1, and then I do think a Sky Reaver popped one of these guys as well with a blaster shot. And then we were able to throw grenades into this fortress and then shoot it with some of the other guns, charge it with Jane Czar and the Banshees, and I think they actually did a few damage. We actually brought the land fortress here down to 7 wounds, so it was under half. So it will have to take a battle shock test on our opponent's turn. The opponent over on this side is kind of stuck because he can't really get to this objective, so we accomplished our goal here. And in general, we've been able to make sure we're going to be scoring our 5 points on both secondaries. And this was basically the end of our turn once we made this charge. So this is the end of our turn 1, basically the beginning of our opponent's second turn. And you can see how the charges kind of ended up. We were able to tie up this fortress, and we lost 1 Banshee on the hit back. And funny enough, we actually charged the Thunderkin once I saw their melee profiles weren't good with the Sky Reavers and actually killed 1 more Thunderkin. So we took that 6-man Thunderkin down to just a 2-man. It kind of worked out really nice because when he fell out of the land fortress, I think he took 2 mortals. And then between all the other stuff that we did with throwing grenades, shooting, D-cannon, charging, fighting, we took that 6-man Thunderkin down to just 2 guys, which really hampered his threats. And so we did a lot of damage between taking out a fortress, a lot of Thunderkin, a transport, and the Jaegers here, which makes it really difficult for him to interact with our objectives. and also just in general did a lot of points worth of damage into our opponent right from turn 1. So it was pretty impressive to see how quickly this army can get up in the opponent's face and actually start doing some damage right away. It's nice to have these long-range threats with the Fire Prisms and the Dark Reapers while we're kind of moving forward and just taking the objectives in the center and forcing the opponent to come to the objectives because they're sticky. They can't just shoot us off the objectives. They have to actually come and touch them, which means our Fire Prisms and Dark Reapers are going to continue to get value throughout the game. So let's take a look at what our opponent did on their turn to respond to our aggression. So on our opponent's turn, he had lifted his bikes and he decided to bring them down over here. And he has established locus and recover assets, which is really not great for him because it's going to be difficult for him to establish locus. He doesn't really have anything near the center, and we're blocking any kind of deep strike. And then as far as recover assets, he really doesn't want to try to be doing actions right now when we have a bunch of stuff in his face that he needs to take care of. So not great secondaries for him. And he's going to try to do what he can to stop us from scoring big on this turn. Now, so what the opponent does is he actually ended up battle shocked on this Land Raider, which meant it couldn't fall back without risking just blowing up. And so he didn't want to fall back with it. He was just going to shoot into the Banshees, which meant that his guys just got out and they moved up this way to stop us from scoring on this objective. He felt pretty confident that the Rangers would be shot off by these guys, which makes sense. They have a lot of shooting. And then he left these guys also in combat just because he didn't want to fall back and have us get our Sky Reavers back on this side of the ruin with a reactive move, which could get them alive, which they could continue to do move blocking and screening and all the things he doesn't want us to be doing. So he decided to leave them in combat and hope that he'd be able to just finish off since they only have 5-up saves. They're only toughness 3. They're extremely squishy. Even though the Thunderkin don't have good melee themselves, it doesn't take much to kill the Sky Reavers. He was thinking about bringing his Terminator-style unit here, the 5-man, to try to shoot our Dark Reapers and get them off the board. But I told him I had 18-inch Lone Op, and with where these Void Reavers are, it pushed him back far enough that he couldn't get in range to shoot these Dark Reapers. And so he decided not to bring them down, but he had forgotten about the same problem shooting into the Void Reavers, which I actually did tell him he could take that back if he wanted to, but he was of the mindset that if you make mistakes, you just kind of live with it and just keep playing. But I definitely told him he could take that back because this is a new army, new rules. Totally understand that you forgot that we have 18-inch Lone Op when we're on an objective with our infantry. But that's why they moved down here to try to shoot these Corsair Void Reavers, and I think they were at like 20-some inches, so it wasn't even really that close. So the 18-inch Lone Op actually coming in handy much more than I expected. Now, he could have brought, of course, his Terminators here to guarantee shooting me off, but the problem with that is I still have the stickied and I still score it, and so it doesn't really fix the issue. And since we just finished turn 1, it's not like he could rapid ingress to kind of fix the problem, so we really created a lot of problems for our opponent right off the bat, and in general, it's going to be hard for him to stop us from scoring. Now, he does move his Jaegers over here around our Sky Reavers, ready to try to get onto the objective and stop us from sticking it since we only have 2 OC on it. He does just need to get 3 of his guys on there to take it off of us, and so he's trying to stop us from scoring on that one as well. And that's basically the turn for the opponent, so let's see how things worked out for him. Okay, so the opponent was able to shoot all the Banshees, killed everything but Janezar herself. He ended up failing one of his shots, and then she ended up making a 4-up invuln against his big cannons, so she lived. And then the Steeljacks were able to easily shoot the Rangers off the objective and stop us from scoring there. And then I actually did make a mistake by picking the wrong model to take off on over here with the Sky Reavers. I should have left the model that was over here, so there was no way for him to consolidate back onto the objective. He still probably could have done it the way he was set up, but I think there was a way I might have been able to make it so that it would have been very difficult for him to have consolidated back onto the objective, but it was going to be close either way, and he was able to kill them and get his Jaegers onto the objective and contest it and get enough OC on there to keep us from sticking it. And I actually did roll a 1 for the mortal wounds, which meant that he took no damage on this one, and that's one of the first ones that have actually failed because it is on a 2-up, and so I ended up scoring no mortal wounds there. The Steeljacks, however, it did take, I think, 2 mortal wounds, and so one of the guys is down to 1 wound, and so the mortal wounds are just continuing to be still annoying for the opponent, And as we continue to get these objectives back, it's just going to be more that he's going to have to keep taking over and over again. But unfortunately for the opponent, he's only scoring 3 points because we're just playing Linchpin. And he's also scoring 0 points for secondaries because he is not going to be able to establish Locus, and he wasn't able to recover assets either. He could do it with his bikes or with his Jaegers, but he didn't have anything outside his deployment zone to also get the other part of it. So unfortunately, he was not able to score any secondaries, but that's partially due to our screening and our ability to just move block the opponent in ways that make it very difficult for him to score primary or secondary, really. Okay, so let's take a look and see how we did on our turn 2. So we got a Display of Might marked for death. He was picking his Thunderkin here, his Land Raider here, and the Jaegers back here for the marked target. And of course, Display of Might was going to be extremely easy because he had basically just 1 or 2 units actually outside the deployment zone wholly, and so that wasn't going to be much of an issue for us to get as well, so we're going to be able to score that pretty easily. Now, we scored the center objective and our home objective for a total of 8 points on primary, and we are looking to start to improve that lead on this turn. So we picked the Jaegers as our gamma target, and basically the plan here, you can see we moved. We have our Fire Prism ready to shoot along this line into either the Jaegers with the Shuriken Cannon, and then the big shot into his transport that's up here. And the other Fire Prism can shoot into either of the Fire Prisms, depending on where we want it to go, which is nice. This Fire Prism had line of sight into the Steeljacks. We have the Dark Reapers into the Steeljacks. We have these Dark Reapers ready to shoot into the bikes. These Dark Reapers also ready to shoot into the bikes. And then, of course, the Dark Reapers Exarchs are going to be able to do their indirect shots as well, just in case we need a little bit more chip damage on something later on in the shooting phase. The Starfang came up to be able to get some shots into the Steeljacks, but also actually into these Thunderkin. More importantly, because that is one of the targets, our Jane Czar is going to end up falling back. Since Jane Czar is not with the Howling Banshees, she does not have fallback in charge. We would actually have to spend a CP for that, and I actually forgot that there is a stratagem for fallback and charge in this detachment, because this is one of the first times I've played it. I did play another quick game with it, but I did forget the stratagem, and so it's kind of nice that even when Jane Czar doesn't have the Banshees with her, she's still able to fall back and charge with that stratagem. But I forgot about it, so we didn't use it here. Don't forget your stratagems, guys. They can make a big difference. So she's kind of in a stuck situation where we don't really want her sitting in combat with a fortress, but we also don't particularly want to fall her back and do nothing with her. So that was kind of the issue there. Now our Sky Reavers, we did move back here, and they moved right here. They actually ended up being battle shocked, but I went ahead and just rolled to test to see if they died or not, and they didn't, which was nice. So they just ran back here, and basically what we're trying to do, and I got rid of the lines here because I'm going to show kind of what we're trying to do and the problem that we've created for our opponent here. So at the end of this turn, you'll see why the opponent was pretty discouraged about continuing the game. But we have our Starfang that moved way up here, and that pushes 9 inches to basically something like this around him. We pushed our Void Reavers up here, which 9 inches is something like this. We have our Sky Reavers up here, which pushes 9 inches, something like this, all the way up into that corner. We have Jane Czar still here. I couldn't remember. I think she ended up moving back here, but either way, she's got a 9-inch circle here. We have our Starfang basically taking care of this corner. We have all this here, and so all this is obviously screened out very easily. And then if you look at kind of the situation, you can see that our opponent can only bring down those Terminators in this top corner, top right corner, or back around his home objective, and that's basically it. So we didn't give our opponent any space to deep strike or bring anything onto the table going into their third turn, and so they have to bring it in turn 3, or at least be ready to rapid ingress it on my turn, and we have basically just screened out the entire board. So when you guys are playing this detachment, really take advantage of our speed and the amount of units we have and our ability to sticky objectives so that we can just really screen a lot out. If the opponent has a lot of things in reserves, you can really punish that by screening most of the board out and making it so they can't bring those units in. And this is basically what we've done here. So let's see how this turn ends up, and we'll talk a little bit about what the opponent may have been able to do, or if you end up playing against Coterie, what some ideas of what to do might work a little better instead. Okay, so on turn 4, you can see the opponent rapid ingressed some of the Terminator guys in his home objective because, again, there's just not really many other places for them to come in. But we were able to take out pretty much all these Steeljacks, and if I would have remembered the CP that Jane'Zar could fall back and then still charge, these guys would definitely not be here. And we made a mistake on this because this should have definitely been our point. We actually are going to give our opponent some primary here that he shouldn't have, because we should have been able to just fall back, charge, take out these guys easy, and if nothing else, the objective would have been contested, worst case scenario. But we weren't able to take out the Thunderkin. The D-Cannon shot everything into them, did 0 damage, and we just weren't able to take out the Thunderkin, unfortunately. But we did take out the bikes that were up here, which is important because they do a pretty good amount of damage, have quite a bit of shooting. We took out his transport up here, and you can see that the Jaegers kind of like had to hop out. And so we have basically eliminated all of our opponent's transports outside of this fortress here that has nothing in it, and we've screened our opponent out of almost the entire board with the exception of the top corners and again just their home objective, which we can probably actually do next turn, screen them completely off the board. So the opponent at this point asked if we could just kind of talk things out a little bit because he didn't see any way that he was going to be able to come back in any meaningful way because we have all these objectives are going to be stickied. Our Starfang's going to be able to come up and sticky this objective. We're going to be able to hold off anything over here because of the fire prisms. We still have Uriel in Deep Strike ready to rapid ingress to react to wherever he brings a big 10-man squad. And so as soon as he brings in that 10-man squad, we can probably just bring in Uriel and do a lot of damage and take it out anyways. And on our opponent's turn, of course, if he doesn't bring them in, we can just bring in Uriel anyways just to have more control. Probably bring him on over on this side, and that way he can come out and take out this Land Raider and kind of help clean up this stuff because Jane'Zar's probably not going to survive much longer. But between Uriel's squad and the Dark Reapers and the Fire Prisms going to be able to move up, we can probably comfortably control and own this side of the board. And even then, if the opponent brings in his 10-man unit, they're going to be pushed back so far in a corner that they're really not going to be effectively in the game. At best, you'll be able to grab this objective at some point later in the game, but by that point, it'll be much, much too late. And if he brings his 10-man squad over there, he doesn't have anything to stop us from scoring on these two objectives, basically for the rest of the game. He does have some Berserks in reserve as well, but they're not really going to be able to do anything, and we have very efficient shooting into them, and so there's not really anywhere they can come in effectively. And so just in general, there was not really anything the opponent felt that they could do to stop us from max scoring on primary, and we have plenty of units to score our secondaries. So you can see that we already had a massive lead going into the third turn. It was going to be 34-19, but then it was going to get even worse because there wasn't really going to be a way for him to get these two objectives away from us. So we were probably going to score another 13 points on turn 3, and the primary difference was just going to continue to grow, and the secondary difference was going to continue to grow as well because he doesn't really have a way to score secondaries because we are just not letting him on the board. So as you can see, is if your opponent lets you screen them out and allows you to take control of the board, then it becomes very difficult for them to actually fight back against this army where we have these sticky objectives, because the fact that most of his damage is shooting is, I think, a very big weakness into Coterie. So we'll talk a little bit about this more as kind of a recap, but in general, I think that when an opponent has mostly shooting for their damage, it's going to be really hard for them to deal with the sticky objective part of this detachment, as we can sticky it as we go do things. So for example, if our opponent stages in a ruin here, and we have our Void Reavers sitting in here, we can move them, sticky the objective, still charge our opponent, tie them up, or possibly kill them, depending on what it is, and screen them out because we're still here away from the objective. And even if we don't have anything on the objective, we're still going to score it unless the opponent can go touch it, which then they're going to take mortal wounds. They'll be out in the open for our fire prisms. And there's really just a difficult situation for armies that do shooting to try to be able to stop us from scoring a lot of primary. And in general, Eldar scores secondary really well. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how this detachment kind of continues to progress and grow. I do think it's going to be very strong into certain armies and certain lists. I could definitely see this being a teams type of army, because I think if you played this quite a bit and got a very good understanding of the matchups of which ones you're able to move block really well, which ones you're going to be able to screen out, which ones are you going to be able to out OC and just in general control the board, I think you're going to do really well into quite a few factions. Now, I could see it struggling into some others that might be fast enough and have enough flying to where our move blocking and some of our ability to try to control the board isn't going to be as effective. But the general idea of actually sticking the objectives, requiring our opponents to actually come onto the objective while having some really nice long-range shooting behind it to shoot them off of those objectives, I think will work in general into a lot of different factions. Because you could imagine as Blood Angels, if they moved up, they'd have plenty of speed to get into these units here and charge and fight and take the objectives off of us, but then they're exposing their really expensive bigger bricks of infantry, most likely, to our Fire Prisms and our Dark Reapers, which are going to just get a lot of value throughout the game. And then we're just going to throw on something else like a Starfang or another unit of Void Reapers or Sky Reapers to sticky again. The long-range shooting should help us take them off the objective with grenades, with blasters, and Fire Prisms and Dark Reapers. We're probably going to be able to take a lot of those infantry off the board, sticky the objective again, force them to send another unit onto the objective to try to get us off of it, and just have that cycle of forcing the opponent onto the objectives in the open for our shooting to get nice shots into them. So I could see this archetype actually being pretty effective into quite a few different types of armies, and this whole idea of just controlling the board, sticking objectives, and having enough chaff to kind of move block and stop our opponent from being able to do what they want to do makes it for kind of an interesting play. One of the funny things that the opponent mentioned was actually how, even though my rolls were extremely bad, he felt like there was very little he could do. I was actually rolling very, very low, and I think we looked at the statistics, and I had almost 24% ones on my rolls, and the rolls were just that bad. They were very noticeable that I was rolling ones and ones over and over and over again. But the fact is that it just didn't matter because we had enough redundancy. Even though I would roll a bunch of ones with some Dark Reapers, we had another squad of Dark Reapers to shoot, and then we had some Fire Prisms shooting, and we had the Starfang shooting, and we had blasters, fusion guns, grenades, and so we just had enough shooting and redundancy and damage that even with a lot of bad rolls, the general game plan of pushing the opponent off objectives, getting them ourselves, sticking them, and just doing enough damage to them while we're accomplishing those goals was very, very effective. So let's hop into the recap. All right, so for the post-game analysis, we are going to talk a little bit about how the game went and how it unfolded. So in turn one, the Votann moved up slowly, controlled a couple objectives, took a little bit of damage, but they kind of played reserved, and I think after talking with the opponent that this was kind of one of the key mistakes. He was so concerned with the long-range firepower and trying to stay hidden and shoot us with his long-range firepower that he wasn't thinking about how quickly we would be able to basically take over the board and make it very difficult for his reserves to come in. So in our turn one, or turn two of the game, our Corsairs moved up real quick. We got some good damage. We took out one of the land fortresses with our Fire Prisms. We were able to do some damage in some of the infantry, and then we were able to sticky all of the center objectives. So all the no man's land objectives were stickied by the end of our first turn, and we were able to also do a lot of move blocking, which helped us control the board. So in our opponent's next turn, they tried to push us back, but they weren't able to push us back very far because we had already move blocked them in a way to where there wasn't very much they could do to regain control of the board. They were able to clear two of the objectives and stop us from scoring on all the objectives, of course. But at the same time, we had plenty of things ready to go to get back on the objectives and also do some more move blocking to continue controlling the board and really make it difficult for him to find places to bring in the units that he had in reserves. So we were able to surge forward, capture back the board, and do some more heavy damage to his units as they were trying to move forward at that point to get on the objectives, which allowed us to start getting some shots into them and basically plinking them down. And since he didn't have the hit back by bringing in the units from reserves to try to punch us back, it just wasn't enough he could really do to get back into the game. We were basically going to keep him shoved into his deployment zone and not really let him come out and play on the objectives, which means that the game would likely have ended somewhere around 100 to 30 because the opponent would have probably been able to score a bit more secondaries, but in all likelihood, we would have probably pretty easily maxed out. We were on track to max out on primary pretty easily, and we were also getting some decent secondaries, which would probably have allowed the game to be something around those lines plus or minus 5 points because the game was called and we didn't finish everything all the way through. Now, I still wanted to cover this battle report just to kind of show an extreme example of how quickly this detachment can really just take control of the board. The sticky objectives and lots of move block in the same list makes it very difficult for slow, non-flying units to be able to get back into our army. I think this is going to be an important aspect of playing Corsair Coterie, is that we're going to have some very, very good matchups where it's going to be very difficult for opponents to be able to play against our list because they are not going to have the capability to get to those objectives, and all they can do is either shoot us off of them, which doesn't mean as much because we still have them stickied and we're going to be scoring them, or they're going to just be shot off the board as they try to get to the objectives, taking some mortal wounds when they touch it, and then getting hit by Fire Prisms and Dark Reapers. And the other thing along those lines is the fact that we have the speed to kind of control where the fight's happening. So if our opponent does push really hard on one objective, in all likelihood, we're still going to be able to control another couple of objectives by doing some good move blocking and screening out the rapid ingresses and deep strikes. So Corsairs can really push forward, and with the heavy support behind them, it makes it difficult to interact with because we can kind of push back a lot of our opponent's army to the point where they can't actually get their shooting into our Fire Prisms. For example, if they have a lot of shooting that's around that 24-inch range, it's just going to be difficult for them to get close enough because we can just keep pushing them back and away from our Dark Reapers that shoot 48 and our Fire Prisms that shoot 60. And on top of that, we can keep some Dark Reapers safe with the 18-inch lone op, and we only have to expose one Fire Prism if we're trying to be a little careful, and we can just shoot through one of the Fire Prisms, which will allow us to keep the others very safe depending on the matchup. As far as the Votann, they are pretty durable and they have good firepower, but the problem for them is that we were able to block off the couple flyers they did have, and the rest of the army was on foot and relatively slow. And so their strength of being durable and having good firepower doesn't mean as much when they can't get to the objectives and they're not able to apply that firepower into the units they want to. We don't mind as much if they're shooting into our Rangers and our Corsairs. We are trying to keep our heavy hitters in the back from getting hurt too bad so they can continue applying their damage throughout the game. And I think in general, one of our goals should be to allow our Reapers and Fire Prisms to shoot at least 2 times, preferably 3 or 4 in a game. That will pretty much guarantee that they've gotten their value and will make up some of the lack of efficiency we have with the Void Reavers and the Sky Reavers. So all in all, I think the armies that are going to be a bit more trouble for the Corsairs are going to be the ones that are able to be more aggressive, stop us from controlling the board so well, and also clear out our screening units and our chaff units quickly to where we have to start moving up with our Fire Prisms and things like that, which we don't particularly want to. But if an opponent forces us to do that and they're able to unsticky the objectives pretty regularly, it could be a much more difficult game for us compared to factions that struggle to move past our blocks and will struggle to actually safely take the objectives back. So I hope this battle report was helpful. Let me know in the comments your thoughts about the Corsairs. This was a quick one, obviously. I wanted to still put it out there just to kind of show that in the right matchups, I think Corsair Coterie is actually quite strong. I think it's going to be one of those detachments where you're going to have some very, very good matchups, and you're going to have some very difficult matchups where some of our other detachments might be a little more well-rounded into more of the factions out there. It'll be much more of a hill to climb for your opponent, whereas we're also going to have some other matchups when they can answer this well that will be very difficult for us, and we'll be the ones trying to climb up the hill. But either way, I do think that there is play with this detachment in a competitive sense. In singles, I just don't know if I would say at this point if it's stronger than some of the other detachment options we have, like Aspect Host, Serpent's Brood, and Seer Council. That's just my opinion so far. There's still a lot of testing and different things to try out, and who knows if something will change in the near future, but the meta could also be a determining factor of how strong this detachment is. Before we end the video, I did want to talk a little bit about changes to the list that I would make. So in my next list, what I was planning on doing was actually dropping the D-cannons. They didn't perform well at all. Their shorter range made it a little bit more difficult to actually get them into the targets. It was relatively okay on this map, but I was a little concerned with moving them up much closer because it does start to get them in danger, and I can imagine against certain factions, them trying to get within 24 inches would be actually kind of a danger zone, possibly, depending on the faction. So I would drop both D cannons. That gives us 150 points, and then I would also probably drop the Arc Raider off Prince Riel. It's nice to have the Vecta Aura, but I actually kind of like bringing him from Deep Strike, and so if he's not on the board that often, it might actually end up working out better to just drop that and use the points elsewhere. I think Webway Pathstone is really good, helps deliver Prince Riel, and allows him to hit a target really hard, and that is probably worth the 20 points to his unit. We did just take a 5-man unit to go with Prince Riel because they are really not the best damage dealers, and I feel like trying to make them do damage in this detachment is just doesn't make as much sense. You could definitely get a lot more damage out of the Void Scarred, but now you're talking about spending many more points to get to the Void Scarred, and in that sense, I'm not 100% sure I think it's worth those points versus just taking Prince Riel and putting those points towards other things that we can use for scouting and screening and move blocking and all the things that we really like to be able to do. I think dropping off Arc Raider, dropping the D cannons will allow us to actually consider taking another unit to try to do some damage, do some chip damage, and then possibly later in the game charge in and do a lot, and that's Asterman with some Dire Avengers and a Falcon. So that's 330 points that we're able to get by dropping the D cannons, gives us 250. Dropping the Arc Raider gives us 280. We'll be dropping one of the Starfangs and one of the Rangers because I think 3 Rangers is a little bit overly redundant. I think 2 is just fine. We don't really need that third one. 2 can kind of start out on the board and we can always redeploy them. And I don't really see much reason to take 3. So I think 2 Rangers would be perfect. And that opens up enough points for us to get those Dire Avengers and the different things we need. And actually look at bringing in some Shroud Runners. I do like the idea of bringing in 1 unit of Shroud Runners. I'm not totally sold on the 6-man brick at this point, but I do think bringing in a 3-man would help. The opponent was able to make some of the saves that they needed to because they were in cover. And being able to strip some cover can really allow our Fire Prisms to finish the job and actually get the opponent, even on 2-ups, to go to a 6-up to be much more likely to fail the save. And into other targets, its blast attack will be much more effective if it has ignores cover, putting it more on par with killing Marines at the same rate as the Dark Reapers are able to do into the regular 2-wound Marines. So just to go over it one more time, we have Asterman, Janzar, Prince Riel. We're going to have 3 sets of Void Reavers. We're going to have 2 sets of Corsair Sky Reavers, 3 sets of Dark Reapers, Dire Avengers, a Falcon, 3 Fire Prisms, Howling Banshees, 2 Rangers, a Shroud Runner, and 1 Starfang. And that's the next list that I'm going to be probably trying out. I think it's going to work better. I think dropping the D cannons makes sense. We have some good long-range firepower between the Dark Reapers and the Fire Prisms. So going into some Shroud Runners to give us some more utility, give us even more move blocking, different types of damage with the scatter lasers, and that will probably be a good thing. And then as well, while we're taking our opponent off the objectives, we'll be able to use the Dire Avengers and Asterman to apply some safe damage as he goes in and out of the Falcon. And then later on in turn, possibly 4 or 5, Asterman can hop out, move up, and shoot and charge into a target and get some really good damage by using the Falcon's rerolls to wound with the sword. And I like the idea of him being able to apply some damage, staying safe, and then pushing in because it will be a matter of time before the opponent does cut through our Rangers, our Corsairs, and Starfangs, and all of our light infantry and light vehicles. They will get through it, and so when they do and start putting some heavier things out there, I like the idea of then sending up our Fire Prisms and Asterman forward to go retake the objectives at the very end of the game and be a problem for the opponent going forward from that time. And so that's kind of the thought process anyways of adding Asterman. I think it'll be an interesting addition. He is pretty good into certain types of targets, such as Terminators, where Janzar does okay into, but can kind of struggle a little bit into certain ones from different factions. And Prince Riel can take out some Terminators, but he's not going to take out a big brick by any stretch by himself. And so having Asterman to really cut down some Terminators to help as we send in Janzar or Prince Riel, I think makes a lot of sense. So this is kind of the changes I'm thinking of. Let me know in the comments what you think. I'm probably going to put this on my Patreon. So if you haven't joined that, check that out. If you join even as a free member, you can see my list for Seer Council. We have a list for Serpent's Brood, and I'm probably going to be putting this list for Corsair Coterie on there as well. And I'll be keeping it up to date as I make changes and continue to evaluate and try to come up with the most meta list that works for me. Of course, my list work for me and my playstyle is not something that I think everybody should just straight copy and use, although I don't discourage people from just copying a list and trying it out and then start making adjustments for how you are able to use the units in the list. If something doesn't seem to be working for you or you can't figure out how to use it, it may just not fit your playstyle very well and it may be worth dropping, but definitely try lists out. And a lot of times that'll get you at a good playing field to where you can make some adjustments for there. Just make sure that when you're replacing things or changing things out, you're keeping track of, are you taking out scoring units? Are you taking out damage units? What types of damage are you taking out? And what are you probably going to need to look at replacing? And in Aeldari, sometimes we have struggles replacing some of our units because they are specialists and they often are very good at a specific type of job. So usually we have units in there for very specific reasons. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments or reach out through Discord. We will be setting up a Discord soon, so be ready to check out the community Discord that will be coming. And thank you all for the support. I'm hoping that these videos are helping players as we try to navigate through the difficult times of playing Aeldari. I do think we should have a higher win rate than we currently do. I think our army is strong enough to do better than a low 40% win rate. So I'm hoping you guys get some value out of these videos and it helps us improve the win rate, and we'll see what happens in the next data slate. We'll definitely be talking about that as well whenever that comes out here in the near future. So stay tuned. We'll be looking at doing some more battle reports soon. Thank you so much. If you made it this far, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Check out the Patreon. Let me know if there's anything you have questions on. And again, thank you for watching. We'll talk to you in the next video.